morning began like a whisper on the alien moon, thin light sliding over silver rocks and long grass that moved like a slow sea. Grant walked the ridge with a scanner in one hand and a travel flask in the other, breathing through a filter, as cold fog wrapped around his shoulders like wet cloth. He had come for minerals and maps, nothing more, but the planet had a way of placing new tasks in his path, and today it started with a sound that did not belong to wind or stone. A small cry, thin and desperate, like a note plucked from a broken harp. He stopped and listened. The fog swallowed the echoes, then returned them. He heard the cry again, closer this time, the kind of sound that made the human heart step forward even when the mind said wait. His boots sank softly into damp soil as he left the ridge and moved into the grass, pushing aside pearl leaves that brushed his suit and left tiny drops that glowed faint blue. Another cry tugged at him from the left. He turned and saw a shape crouched under a twist of roots. It was small, all ribs and trembling fur, gold with faint darker bands that shimmered when the fog shifted. The eyes were too big for the face, bright and wet, watching him with fear and hope together. It looked part tiger, part child, and completely lost. Grant kept his hands low and open. He spoke in a gentle voice, the same tone he used for lost dogs back home. "Hey there, it's all right. I'm not here to hurt you." The little creature's ears flicked. It made a sound like a purr mixed with a whine. Its tail was thin and wrapped tight around a back leg like it was hugging itself. He knelt, his knees sinking into the soft ground, and slid off his pack. Inside he had ration bars and a sealed pouch of warm stew. He did not think twice. Hunger was older than fear, and he had seen that look before in refugee camps on Mars. He tore a ration bar in half and placed the bigger piece on the ground, then pushed it toward the cub with the edge of a glove. The cub sniffed, stepped back, then crept forward again. Its whiskers trembled, its tongue flicked, and then it bit. The sound it made when it tasted food was not a growl. It was a soft, broken sound, as if the throat had forgotten how to swallow, and was learning again. It ate fast, then paused to look up at Grant, then ate again, crumbs sticking to its fur like tiny seeds. Grant smiled without showing teeth. He set the stew pouch near the roots and opened it a crack. Warm scent rose into the cold air. The cub's head lifted, its nostrils flared, and it took tiny steps forward until steam curled against its nose. It glanced at him, and this time there was less fear in its eyes and more fierce focus on the food. It lapped at the edge, then pushed its face into the pouch, happy and messy. He watched the little thing like a guard at a door, eyes moving from fog to tree line and back. He knew the rule every explorer learns early. Where there is a cub, there is a parent, and where there is a parent, there is danger. Still, he did not reach for his rifle. His hand rested near it, but he kept the safety on and his palm open. If the mother came, he wanted her to see a man feeding her child, not threatening it. The fog shifted, bringing new smells. Wet stone and bitter leaf, and something he could not name. A heat under the cold. The cub slowed, full now, its breathing deeper and less panicked. It pressed its cheek to the pouch like it wanted to sleep there. Then it looked up at Grant again, a small chirp leaving its throat. It stepped back, tail uncoiling. It turned toward the trees, took 2 steps, then stopped and looked over its shoulder. Grant felt the pull in that look, an invitation or a warning. He did not know which. He stayed on one knee, hands still. He whispered, "Go on, little one, go home." The cub tilted its head like it understood, then slipped into the grass, body low, moving with a careful grace that belonged to a hunter's child. Silence settled, not empty but crowded with the feeling that he was not alone. He waited with the patience of a man who had learned patience from endless starfields and long repairs. He counted breaths, watched the fog weave silver bands between trunks. He heard a low rustle, then another. He stood slowly, not tall, not wide, just steady. The grass bent before something large. the way waves bend before a ship. A shape paused at the edge of sight, then stepped forward. The mist clung to it like a thin veil. Grant saw gold first, then black, then white teeth like polished bone, eyes like burning amber, cut through the gray. The cub trotted ahead, and then back again, weaving around the taller legs, rubbing against them, proud and excited. Grant's heart beat hard once, and then settled. He did not raise his hands. He did not lower them. He kept them where a mother could see them, open and harmless. The tall figure was a woman in shape, but other in every way. Fur catching the weak sun, stripes flowing like ink along powerful shoulders, ears high, tail moving in a slow, measured line. Her face had angles both sharp and soft, and her gaze pinned him like a spear thrown from royal height. The cub pressed its head to her knee and looked at Grant with a soft chirp. The mother's nostrils flared. She breathed him in. The scent of metal and oil and ration wheat and human sweat. There was no hate on her face, but there was a test, a question older than language. Will you run? Will you reach for the gun? Will you lower your eyes? Grant did none of those things. He bowed his head just a little, not a slave's bow, and not a soldier's salute, only respect. Then he touched his chest with 2 fingers. Grant, he said, slow and clear. His name fell into the mist and lay there between them like a small warm stone. The mother's eyes moved to the empty pouch near the roots. She looked at the crumbs on her child's fur. Her ears eased, her jaw relaxed. The fog thinned for a breath, and he could see the faint rise and fall of her shoulders. She made a sound, like a purr wrapped around a warning, gentle but edged. The cub answered with a happy trill and bumped Grant's boot with its head. Something shifted in the air, not safe, not dangerous, something in between. A bridge with no planks yet, only ropes. The mother took 1 step closer, the ground quiet under her weight. Her gaze never left his face. The cub climbed the root and sat, tail curling like a question mark. Grant felt the moment balance, as if one wrong move would break it, and one right breath would hold it. He did not reach for anything. He only waited. The fog moved again, and in that thin light, the stripes on her shoulders seemed to glow. Her mouth opened just enough for sound. Not a growl, not a roar, a word shaped by a voice that was velvet over stone. You fed my child, she said, and the mist carried the words like a promise and a warning together. The words hung in the fog like a bell note, soft but impossible to ignore. You fed my child, the mother said, and the cub pressed close to her leg as if to prove it. Grant kept his hands open, his breath even, his eyes steady but not hard. He could feel the air shift around them, the way a room changes when a queen enters, though there were no walls here, only trees and mist, and the small heartbeat of a new trust. She stepped closer, not rushing, not hiding. Her movements were the language of strength that does not need to shout. Gold stripes flowed over her shoulders and along her arms, fading into a deeper bronze near her wrists. Her tail moved in a slow line that spoke of control. Her eyes were amber fire behind the veil of fog, measuring him, not with fear, not with hate, but with a question he could not yet name. Grant felt his own name like a small anchor in his chest. He had said it once, and he said it again, slow and gentle. Grant. The mother tilted her head, as if tasting the sound. Her ears eased a fraction. The cub chirped and tapped Grant's boot, then looked up at her. The message from the child was simple. This one feeds me. This one is kind. A low sound left the mother's throat, part purr, part warning. A sound that said, both thank you, and do not forget who I am. Grant bowed his head a little. He kept his body language quiet and respectful. He remembered the rule of wild places. Never stare down a protector. Never turn your back. Breathe like you are part of the land, and not an invader. He breathed, and waited. She walked in a circle around him, close enough that the fog carried her warmth. He smelled resin, and rain, and the sweet mineral scent of fur, dried near fire. Her steps were silent, her shadow long on the pale grass. When she came to his right side, she spoke again, in a voice that felt like velvet over stone. "You are far from your pack, human, but you did not take. You gave." Grant nodded once. "I could not leave the little one hungry. Hunger is a knife no child should carry." The mother's whiskers lifted. Her mouth shaped something like a smile. Not soft, not easy, but there. The cub purred at the sound and rubbed its cheek along Grant's shin guard, leaving a faint trail of gold hair on the dark plate. The next words surprised him, not for their meaning, but for their form. Her speech was careful, old words pressed into new shapes, as if she had learned the human tongue from echoes and trade posts in long memory. "I am Selra," she said. The name moved like a river through the mist. "Selra," he repeated it, and her ears tipped toward him as if the sound pleased her. Selra leaned near the empty stew pouch and breathed in. Her gaze flicked to his hands, rough from work, nails short, a small cut near the thumb, signs of a maker and not a killer. She looked at the rifle on his back and the safety light that glowed like a tiny star. For a moment her eyes hardened, then softened again as the cub climbed the root and stared at her with hopeful light. "You did not take out your teeth of fire," she said. "You gave meat and kept your sparks sleeping. This is rare, human." Grant answered with the truth he always carried. "My spark is for defense, not for show." He looked at the cub, who yawned wide and showed small, not yet sharp fangs. Then he looked at Selra. "If I was the one hungry and my child weak, I would want help, not fear." Selra studied him, as if his face were a map. Her tail drew a question in the air. The fog thinned for a breath, and Grant saw a small scar near her collarbone, a pale line that told a story of an old fight and a narrow survival. There was grace in the way she held herself. Yes, a beauty that was not just shape, but certainty. A kind of quiet power that made the space around her feel warmer. That power had an edge, a playfulness that felt like a smile near a knife. It was not a threat to him yet, but it was not an invitation either. It was simply who she was. A mother, a hunter, a ruler of her ground. She moved again, closer now, until he could see the fine texture of her fur, short along the cheek, a little longer at the jaw. Each breath made a soft ripple. Her voice dropped to a lower music. "Your kindness woke a law. Human, not a small law, an old one. My child ate by your hand, and so the mother must know the hand." She raised a clawed finger, not pointing at him, but painting a shape in the air. "My people keep their promises, and they keep their tests." The cub looked between them, as if it knew this part of the story too. Grant did not flinch. "What test?" he asked. Selra's eyes smiled without her mouth. "You will walk with me, human. You will stand where my ancestors listen. They will smell your truth. They will know if your gift was a trap or a seed. If you pass, the hunt will not wake for you. If you fail, the ground will take back what it gave." Simple words, heavy weight. He thought of his maps and his minerals and his mission clock. He thought of the child licking stew and crumbs from its whiskers. He thought of stories from Earth, of bread shared across fences, of wolves made calm by kindness. He nodded once. "I will walk." Selra's shoulders eased. She did not thank him. She did not need to. The cub chirped with joy and sprang from the root to land in the grass with a soft thump. Before they moved, Selra reached out slowly. She touched two claws to his chest plate, not pressing, just marking a place. Her eyes held his for a long breath. She was close enough that he could see the thin ring of darker amber around her pupils. A sign, maybe, of mood or rank. Her voice softened. "You will not run. You will not bear your spark. You will not lie. If danger comes, you will stand behind me." "Do you agree?" Grant said. "I agree." The fog drifted like a curtain opening. Selra turned, and the grass made a path for her. The cub trotted between them, stopping to look back at Grant every few steps. Grant adjusted his pack and let his rifle hang quiet on its sling. He followed, not too near, not too far, matching his stride to hers without trying to lead. The forest waited with its slow breath, trees tall and silver, leaves holding tiny lights that gathered like stars along their edges. As they walked, strange birds clicked in the canopy like pebbles in a glass. A low stream sang somewhere to the right, carrying the smell of metal and sweet root. Grant felt eyes on him now and then, the watchers of the pride, glimpses of gold and shadow that moved when he looked and froze when he did not. Selra did not call to them. She did not need to. Her presence spoke for her. The cub brushed against Grant's boot and then dashed ahead to weave through Selra's steps, safe and bold, in the corridor of her power. They reached a place where the trees stepped back from a wide, flat stone. The fog here was thinner, as if heat rose from beneath the rock. Selra stopped at the edge and turned to him. Her face was different now, calmer and more serious, as if she had put on an invisible crown. She lifted her chin. Her words carried the weight of a door about to open. "Stand here, human, and do not move until I call your name. If the ground speaks, answer with your truth. If the wind speaks, answer with your breath. If the child speaks, answer with your heart." Grant stepped onto the stone. It felt warm through his boots. The cub sat near his left foot and purred like a small engine. Selra walked to the far side. Her tail drew a final line in the air. She placed her palm on the stone and closed her eyes. The forest fell quiet. Even the stream seemed to lower its voice. Grant felt the first small tremble under his feet, as if something old had just woken up. Selra opened her eyes, and they burned like two small suns in the mist. "The test has begun," she said, and the silence leaned in to listen. The stone warmed under Grant's boots like a sleeping heart waking up. Tiny shivers running through the flat surface in slow waves. The fog pulled back until the clearing looked like an island in a gray sea. Selra stood with one palm on the rock, eyes half closed, lips moving in a low chant that felt older than the trees. The cub pressed against Grant's ankle and looked up, as if asking him to be brave for both of them. From the trees came soft shapes, watchers with gold stripes and steady eyes. They did not speak. They did not bare teeth. They simply formed a ring at the edge of the clearing. Their presence made the air feel heavier, like a story coming to the most important page. Grant kept his hands open and his breath even. He remembered Selra's terms. He would not run. He would not lie. He would not lift his spark. The stone brightened in thin lines that spread beneath his feet, patterns like leaves, rivers, and claw marks. A voice rose from the rock, not male or female, not young or old. It sounded like wind down a canyon. "Human, why do you give?" Grant swallowed once and answered with the simple truth he carried like a small fire. "Because a child was hungry, and I had food. I did not want the little one to hurt." The voice folded around his words, and then let them go. Another line of light bloomed. The cub made a soft trill, pleased that he had spoken like a friend. Selra opened her eyes and stepped closer. Her voice joined the stone, weaving a second thread. "Our law is not a cage. It is a bridge. Feed the child, and the mother must judge. The mother judges and the ancestors listen. If gift hides a blade, the earth will taste the metal and spit it out. If gift is clean, the earth will keep the giver in shade." The watchers breathed together, a soft tide at the edge of the island of stone. Grant felt a tug at his thoughts, a test not of words but of reflex. The light on the rock drew a picture that moved. Shapes formed into a memory, a supply line ambush from 2 winters ago. He watched himself in the vision raise a weapon at a shadow that leaped from scrub. The shadow became the shape of a small animal, then a child. His stomach tightened. In the vision, he lowered the weapon in time. In the clearing he stood very still. The stone drank his silence and found steadiness there. The voice returned. "What did you want from the child?" Grant answered. "Nothing. I wanted the child to live and sleep with a warm belly. I wanted the mother to find her little one alive." Ears eased at those words. The cub pressed its cheek to his boot and purred like a tiny drum. The watchers' tails moved once, a whisper of approval that did not break their calm. A new pattern lit beneath him, a circle of small points. Selra spoke again. This part is the scent of truth. You will give the earth a single drop from your hand, not as a price, but as a name. Grant held out his left hand. Selra drew a claw with care. The tip so fine, it felt like a whisper against his skin. A bright bead gathered and fell into a carved hollow. The stone hissed softly, and the bead became light that sank and spread. The smell was not iron and harsh. It was clean, like rain on hot dust. Grant felt the questions press closer. Human, what is your fear? He could have said the easy things. The night, the unknown, failure. Instead he gave the one that sat deepest. Losing the chance to do the right thing when it matters. The circle of small lights brightened and then steadied. Selra's mouth shaped a quiet, almost smile that did not show teeth. For a heartbeat, her gaze held pride. Not for him as a warrior, but for him as a speaker of plain truth. The stone rose a fraction, as if inhaling. The next vision came like a wave. He saw men with red marks on their armor. Not his crew, not his friends. They were the kind that take and call it trade. They moved toward the same root tangle where the cub had hidden. In the vision their hands were rough and fast. In the clearing, Grant's fingers tightened and then loosened. He did not move his feet. He did not reach for the rifle. His breath went in and out like a slow bellows. The vision faded. The rock cooled a little. The watchers did not blink. Selra spoke to the ring, not just to the stone. He stands like one who has been hungry himself. She looked back to Grant. Is this true? He nodded. Yes. On Mars there were weeks when I counted every crumb. I learned that hunger takes away thinking, and giving it back begins with a bowl. The cub touched his hand with its nose, as if it could smell those old days in his skin. The stone voice lowered, until it was almost a purr. If danger came for the child and the mother. Where would you stand? Behind the mother, Grant said, fast and clear. I would not take her fight from her. I would guard her back. I would carry the child if she needed. Both hands. Selra's tail drew a line in the air like a signature. The watchers seemed to breathe a little deeper. The law liked the shape of that answer. The light changed from leaf to flame, from flame to water, from water to a small nest. The voice asked a softer thing. What will you take for your gift? Grant shook his head. I already took what I needed. The feeling that I did not look away. The stone held that answer for a long breath. Then a low drum beat rose, not from any hand, but from the earth itself, measured and steady. The fog thinned more, showing the sky like pale glass above the trees. Selra lifted both palms and spread her claws wide. Her words carried the weight of verdict and welcome together. The bridge holds. The gift is clean. The name does not burn. She faced Grant. Her eyes were bright but calm. By law, you may walk our paths without hunt for 3 moons. By law, you may enter my den as guest. By law, if you are called, you must answer. Grant felt the last sentence like a hook that was not sharp, but firm. A bond is not a door that only opens one way. The cub leaped in a circle, delighted. It climbed the low of his shin and slid down. It made a small sound that translated to anyone in any language, as now we can breathe. Grant laughed once, a short warm sound, then stilled. Remembering where he stood, he bowed his head to the watcher's ring. He bowed to Selra, not deep, not small, just true. One of the watchers, older, with silver edges in the gold, stepped forward to the stone's lip. She sniffed the air near Grant, and then near the cub. She gave a tiny nod, almost nothing, and returned to the ring. Selra lowered her hands. The light sank back into the stone, leaving only faint lines like old rivers. The drum beat faded until it was only his pulse and the cub's per Selra. Spoke in a lower voice meant for him alone. The test is passed, human. Now comes the part without drums, the quiet part. You will come to our fire and eat. You will sit where my child can touch your sleeve, and remember today as safe. You will hear our law in stories, not only in stone. She stepped off the rock, and the fog began to move in again, like a shy curtain. Come, Grant. He followed her from the warm circle into the cool trees. The watchers melted back into the forest. Not gone, never gone. Just near in a way he could feel but not see. The path underfoot was soft and springy. The cub trotted between them, tail high. The test was over. But the story had just changed its shape. Somewhere beyond the next bend, the quiet part was waiting. And quiet, he knew, was where real choices grew roots. Selra led Grant through a narrow cleft in the rocks where the fog thinned and warm air breathed out. The den opened like a bowl of amber light, fire flickering low in a stone cradle. Smoke drifted up through a crack in the ceiling and left a scent of sweet resin and fruit. Woven mats lay on the ground, soft with dried grass and fir bowls. Of carved shell held berries, dried meat, and slices of starfruit that shone like small moons. The cub ran ahead, happy and bold now, and curled on a pile of soft pelts, with a satisfied sigh. Grant stood near the doorway and waited. His eyes walked the den without touching anything. He took in the small signs of a home, a smooth pebble placed where a paw would step, a string of beads made from bright seeds and bone, a painted claw mark on the stone that repeated 3 times, like a prayer. Selra watched him watch, her tail drawing a slow shape in the air. The firelight painted long gold bands across her shoulders and cheeks, and her eyes caught every spark like they were born from it. She took a bowl and filled it with warm nectar from a kettle that sat at the edge of the coals. The steam smelled of herbs and ripe fruit and something bright. She offered the bowl to Grant with both hands, palms up, a gesture of welcome and also of measure. He accepted with a small bow of his head. The nectar was sweet and sharp. It warmed his mouth and then his chest. He drank once and handed it back. Selra sipped from the same place his lips had touched. Not careless, not shy, simply deliberate. Her voice was low, like a song sung after the hunt. On the stone, the law judged. In the forest, the watchers followed. Here, the fire listens. My child ate from your hand, so my den opens, but it opens with truth, not with shadows. She set the bowl aside and stood closer. Grant could see the faint pattern of tiny scars near her wrist, old and neat like stitches from battles already counted and closed. The cub lifted its head and made a sleepy chirp. Selra glanced back and softened, then turned to Grant again. When she spoke next, there was a velvet edge to the words. You should know the meaning of what I said by the roots. You may claim me. She let the sentence rest, like a blade placed gently on a table. Not swinging, not hidden. Grant felt the weight of it. Not sharp with lust, not dirty, but heavy with old custom and choice. He answered, slow and plain. I do not take what is not offered in full light. Selra's mouth tilted, almost a smile. I did offer human, but you hear only one meaning. In my people's tongue, to claim can mean many things. It can mean to claim fight, to claim shelter, to claim teaching, to claim din rights, to claim touch. She traced the air with a claw as if writing the list on smoke. Then she nodded toward the cub. A mother may offer any of these to the one who feeds her child, and the one who fed may choose one, some, or none. If he chooses none, he must still accept a mark of bond for a time, 3 moons. The law is not a trick, but it is a test of heart. Grant breathed out, the sound small in the warm room. He looked at the cub, then back to Selra. Her gaze did not flinch or flicker. He set his pack down and reached in. He brought out a narrow band of braided cord, earth fiber mixed with a thread of carbon. He had made it on long nights between stars, a habit to keep his hands busy and his mind steady. He held it out with both hands. For den rights, he said. For shelter shared, 4 stories traded, for the child's safe sleep. Selra tilted her head. Curious, she took the braid, rubbed it between finger and thumb, and tasted the air near it. Old dust, metal, a little oil, a little salt. It is yours, she said, and that mattered. Her eyes warmed a shade. She tied the braid around a small carved ring from a shelf and looped it around Grant's wrist. This is my answer. Den rights given and taken, protection shared, no touch without asking, no fear without standing. Her claws tapped lightly on the ring 3 times. A soft ceremony that the fire seemed to echo. The cub rose and trotted over. It placed a small paw on Grant's boot, then climbed his shin and balanced with ease. Selra watched closely. A test. Inside a test, Grant bent slowly and lifted the cub with careful hands. He held it against his chest plate, and the small body relaxed with a deep kitten purr. Selra's shoulders eased. She stepped closer, placed her palm for a breath on Grant's shoulder as if fixing the picture in her mind. Mother, child, guest, fire, all in one frame. She pulled back and took another bowl. This one held thin slices of meat, seasoned with crushed leaf and salt. She ate 1 slice, then offered a slice to Grant. It was tender and smoky. He nodded thanks. The quiet stretched in a good way. The fire sent up a small pop like a laugh. Outside, the forest drifted and breathed. Selra spoke again, softer. There are other meanings of claim that I could offer. She let that hang without push, and then, with a playful flash of teeth, added, another night. Perhaps, if paths stay true. Grant did not answer with words. He met her gaze and let his respect and his patience do the talking. She took that answer like a gift and did not press. Her tail drew an amused, satisfied line in the air. The offer was not a joke, and the refusal was not a door slammed. It was to hunters stepping side by side, instead of colliding. A distant sound touched the doorway. A thud, then a scrape. Selra turned her head. Ears high, eyes thin. The cub went still in Grant's arms. He set the little one down with care. The second sound was softer, like pads on stone. Grant moved, a half step behind Selra, exactly where he had promised to stand. She reached back without looking and brushed his wrist once. A wordless good. A shadow paused at the gap. A shape like Selra, but leaner, with darker bands and eyes that held more storm than sun. The watcher was not one of the ring from the clearing. The air changed, not to panic, but too sharp. Selra lifted her chin a fraction. Her voice was daylight now, not night. Speak. The visitor's whiskers twitched. She smelled the din, smelled Grant, smelled the cub's joy still hanging like a bell. Tone. Her mouth pulled tight. The elders will grind their teeth at this scent, she said. The law made a bridge today, and some prefer rivers without bridges. Selra did not look away. The law is older than their teeth, she said. If they bite the bridge, they bite the ancestors. The visitor stared long, then flicked her tail. Her eyes moved to Grant, with interest and caution. 3 moons, guest, she said. Do not make them feel longer. She left, silent as she came. The den exhaled. The cub nudged Grant's knee, as if to say it was time to sit again. Selra did not hide her relief, but she did not sink with it either. She poured more nectar. She handed the bowl to Grant. He took it. Their fingers brushed for a breath. Very simple, very clear. Selra spoke to the fire, and to him at once. Tonight we share den rights and protection. We share the story of our names. We mark the child's memory with safety. She sat on the mat and patted the space beside, and a little behind her. He sat where she showed, near enough for warmth, not near enough to crowd. The cub curled between them and put its head on Grant's boot like it was a pillow. Selra began to tell a story of her first hunt, of a river in flood, of a rope bridge that snapped, and how a cub was saved by teeth-gripping fur, and a mother refusing to let the water choose. Grant listened and watched the fire write pictures on the stone. He added a small story of earth rain that smelled like green thunder, and of a soup line where a stranger pressed half a loaf into his hand and changed the size of the night. Outside, something paced the edge of the trees for a while and then went away. Inside, the air held a promise drawn in warm smoke. The offer Selra had spoken near the roots still lived in the room. Not heavy now, not dangerous, but bright and patient. Both of them knew its shape. Both of them knew it would not be forced. When the fire lowered to a hush, Selva stood and lifted a woven screen to close the cleft a little. Not all the way. Never all the way. She looked back at Grant. Her face held that same royal ease. That same play near the knife. But now there was something softer layered under it. Gratitude that did not bow. Trust that did not beg. She nodded once. Very small. Very sure. The night answered with a cool breath from the stars, and the din held, warm and ready for whatever the dawn would bring. Night came like a soft animal and settled in the den, the fire coals breathing low, the smoke thin and sweet. Outside, the forest made slow sounds, a leaf sliding, a small hunter stepping, a distant drip like a clock. Inside, warmth and the smell of fruit held steady. Grant fixed the mat near the fire, the way Selra showed him, a hand space behind her shoulder. Never past her tail. The cub sprawled on its back between them with paws in the air, belly full and safe. Selra checked the cleft once, set a smooth stone to hold the screen, and returned to the glow. He took out a small cloth roll from his pack. Inside were tiny tools, a needle of bone, a thin cord, a tube of med salve. Selra watched with curious eyes, not worried, only alert. He lifted her worn shoulder cloak and pointed to a place where the binding had frayed. "May I?" he asked. She touched the braid on his wrist and nodded once. "You may mend what keeps me warm." He sewed with careful hands. Small tight stitches, no waste. The cub crawled closer and watched like a student, tail tapping the mat in a slow drum. Selra rested on one hip, long legs folded, a queen at ease, but never unready. When Grant finished, he rubbed a thumb along the seam to smooth it. She tested the cloak with a pull, and gave a low sound that meant good. He opened the tube of med salve and waited. Her eyes narrowed, not in anger, in measure. "Where?" she asked. He nodded, toward the pale line near her collarbone. "It will ease the pull." She considered for a breath, then sat tall and rolled her shoulder so the old scar caught the firelight. He warmed a little salve between his fingers and touched the skin around the scar, not on at first, letting the body learn the heat. Her ears twitched, then eased. He worked in slow circles, patient as rain. The purr that rose from her chest began small and grew until the mat hummed. Her claws slipped out and tapped the mat, a rhythm of trust. When he finished, she breathed deeper. "The pain sleeps for now," she said. "You have hands like quiet water." He smiled without teeth. "I learned long nights fixing small things, tools, clothes, people when I could." Selra's tail drew a lazy line. Her gaze warmed. "In my den, hands that mend are higher than hands that boast." The cub pressed its nose into the salve scent and sneezed, then laughed in a kitten way that made both of them softer. Grant clicked, a tiny player on his wrist. No speaker, only a thread of sound like a lullaby. A human tune he hummed as a boy in long dark winters. Selra tilted her head, listening with more than ears. The rhythm found her heartbeat and sat there. She made a low harmony that was more purr than voice. The two sounds braided like cords over the fire. She spoke when the tune faded. "My first mate came with loud songs and sharper teeth. His gifts were heavy. His steps were heavy. His law was heavy." She touched the carved ring she had tied to Grant's braid. "He was lost in a flood hunt." She did not look away from the coals. "Some said the river took him because he would not share a rope. The elders did not say his name after that." The cub's ear flicked, hearing parts of a story it knew but had never been told in this quiet shape. Grant answered with simple truth. "On Mars, a stranger once cut his bread in half and fit it into my hand. My night changed size." Selra met his eyes. "In my den. We keep that stranger's law," she said. And the words walked around the fire and sat down like a friend. She rose and lifted a small clay bowl of pale ash. With 2 fingers she drew a short line on her own brow. Then a matching line on his cheek, not hard, not soft. This mark says, guest and guard. She said, it fades with sleep, but the memory does not. He lifted a thin strip of earth fiber from his pack and tied it to the den's doorstone, a little banner that moved when the night breathed. This says, I will return what I borrow, he said, and I will leave the place better than I found it. A new sound touched the doorway, faint, far, like bone on bone. Selra went still, ears up, tail stiff. The cub sat, paws tucked, eyes round. What is it? Grant asked in a whisper. Ridge hunters, she said. Not our pride, not our law. Their scouts taste borders before dawn. She looked at his rifle, then at his face. Set your eyes of sound, if you must. But keep the spark asleep, unless the cub's breath is in danger. He nodded. He slid a small disc from his pack and tapped it to wake. A ring of low sensors blinked once and went dim. Quiet sentries that listened without shouting. Selra called softly. Two shadows slipped into the cleft. Watchers with gold and night in their coats. They smelled the sensors and clicked with approval. They will chirp if the wind brings metal teeth. One said. Selra answered with the old word for good. The watchers settled near the doorway like carved lions that could move in a blink. The fire sank to glow. Grant laid his blanket where Selra's hand had marked space. He did not lie at her side. He lay the way a guard rests, half turned to the door, half turned to the mother and child. Selra stretched with a slow cat grace and curled with her back near his shoulder, not touching yet, only near. After a moment, she set one claw lightly on his chest plate, where she could feel his heart like a slow drum. If the night speaks, I will wake before it finishes its first word, she said. He answered in a voice meant for this small room. I stand behind you, and I will carry the child, if your hands must be free. Her eyes closed. Her mouth shaped a smile that showed the tips of her fangs. Not warning, not hunger, only a sign of a hunter who can finally rest without dropping her guard. The cub pushed its head under Grant's hand and made a deep purr that filled the spaces between their breaths. The den became one picture: mother, child, guest, fire, law, and promise, all held by warm stone and old stories. The first chirp came like a needle under cloth, small, fast, then another. Grant's sensors breathed a hush that only he heard. He lifted his head. Selra's eyes opened at once, gold in the dim. She was already a step from sleep to stand. The watchers' tails went still, as wood. Wind brings metal, one whispered. 3 steps out, low to the ground, Grant's hand found his rifle, but did not wake the spark. Selra's voice was a breath. Stay behind me. She moved like a shadow with stripes, the soft kind and the sharp kind both alive in her bones. Grant rose into his place, the cub tucked tight in his arm, and the night that had promised quiet now turned its face and showed them the next page. Asterisk, the night that had been soft turned to iron. The chirps from Grant's sensors stitched a thin line of warning through the dark. Selra rose in one smooth breath, her ears high, her tail still, her eyes bright as coals. Grant moved behind her like a shadow that chose to be loyal. The cub curled against his arm, small heart racing fast and brave. The 2 watchers at the cleft lowered their bodies until they were almost part of the stone. A shape slid along the rocks outside, then another, then a third, low and careful, not from Selra's pride, not from her law. Ridge hunters, the same kind the watcher had named. Their scent carried dust, cold steel, and bitter root, a smell that did not belong to this den. Selra lifted one hand and touched Grant's wrist with a single claw. Wait, her touch said. Judge with breath before you judge with fire. Grant nodded, his thumb away from the spark, his other hand holding the cub close under his cloak. A voice came from the cleft, thin and sharp, open. Selra of the gold stripes, the elders have a question that must be answered before dawn. Selra did not move. She spoke in the steady tone of one who owns her ground. The stone has already answered for me. The law has spoken. The guest is marked. The child is safe. Go and tell your elders the bridge stands. The voice hissed like a snake. On frost. The bridge is a trick, it said. The human spark will wake and burn our roots. Give us the child, and come before us alone, or we take both, and call it justice. The cub made a small growl, a brave sound from a small throat. Grant felt it in his chest like a spark that did not burn. He bent his head so the little one could hear his whisper. I have you, little hunter. I will not let go. Selra's tail flicked once, a sign that she had heard and approved. Her eyes shifted to the watchers. One moved to the high corner of the cleft like a ghost, and vanished. The other stayed at the door, ready to spring. Selra spoke again, lower now, sharp as a clean blade. If you step through my doorway without my word, you step into a hunt you will not enjoy. The ridge hunters laughed, a dry laugh with no joy. We step for law, they said, not for sport. They moved closer, the sound of pads on stone. Grant felt the air change, the way it changes before a storm breaks. He set the cub down on the inner mat and pulled the woven screen aside with care, leaving a thin path for Selra's strike. The first hunter slipped into the gap, lean and dark, eyes thin with hate and fear mixed together. Selra did not leap, not yet. She let the hunter come 3 steps in. Then she stepped forward with the calm of a queen who knows the floor plan of her own throne room. Her claws did not flash. Her voice did. Last warning, heir of the ridge. Turn your body around and take your teeth back to your own fire, heir bared. Fangs with a smile that was not a smile. The elders want the human, the cub, and the mother. 3 prizes, he said. 3 gifts to make a warning. He moved his hand and a short blade slid from his wrist wrap. A dull gray fang of metal. Grant did not move first. Selra did. She flowed. Not fast, not slow, just right. Her paw gripped Heir's wrist, in a circle of steel and fur. Her other hand pushed his shoulder and turned him so his blade pointed at the stone, not at her people. Her voice stayed level. You bring a metal tooth into my den. You bring a lie into the mouth of truth. And lies choked the speaker. Air hissed and twisted. Trying to set his weight, he never saw the watcher from above drop like a falling leaf that decided to be a spear. The watcher pinned Air's other arm and pressed him to the floor with a simple, old move. The second and third ridge hunters stepped in at last, too late to be clever, blades ready, eyes narrow. Grant moved right then, not to the front, to the side, where Selra's flank would be blind if something slipped past. His rifle stayed low. His other hand lifted a small capsule, a human trick that did not cut. The capsule left his fingers and kissed the stones with a soft tap, a breath of thick, sweet smoke rolled up, not a poison, a plant powder he carried for nest pests and camp gnats. It stung eyes and wiped the edges off rage. The ridge hunters flinched, blinking, their noses betrayed by the bitter in their own scent as the powder mixed with air. Selra did not cough. She had smelled this dust already when Grant set up the sensors. Her eyes stayed clear, her strike clean. She stepped into the nearest attacker's space and took the blade hand in a neat circle, wrist to stone, claw to throat, not cutting, only promising. The third hunter lunged for the cub, blind with bad choices. Grant's body hit him like a door that someone forgot was closed. No spark, no metal teeth, only a human shoulder warm. With decision, the hunter bounced, lost his breath, and saw the muzzle of a rifle that was awake now, but not angry. The little cub behind Grant opened its mouth and made a roar that was more heart than volume. And somehow, it was enough. Air tried to break free. The watcher's knee said no. Selra looked at the 3 with a calm that came from an old place inside her bones. This is how law works, she said, not yelling, not begging. The stone judged, the watcher saw. The din welcomed. You came with blades to cut a bridge you did not build. Go back to your elders and teach them what your wrists learned today. The hunter under Grant's shoulder spat a thin string on the floor. We do not leave without a trophy, he hissed. Give us the human's ring, or the cub's tuft. Grant felt the ring Selra had tied to his braid. He lifted his wrist so they could see it. His voice carried the same steadiness Selra used. I will not give a thing taken from trust, he said. And you will not take from a child while I can stand, the Ridge Hunter sneered. Then his eyes cut to Selra. He thought he saw softness in the way she stood near the cub. He leaped for the small body again. So sure, so wrong. Selra moved, a ribbon of gold and shadow. She was a mother and a hunter, and in that breath she was both with all the ancient practice of her line. Her claw caught the attacker's blade, snapped it like a twig. Her knee set his chest to the floor. Her other hand pressed his head to the mat. The cub did not cry. It watched with fierce eyes and tiny fangs showing. Grant stood over them both like a wall with a heartbeat. From the trees came a new sound, not the thin laugh of ridge hunters. A deeper rhythm, feet moving as one, voices low and ready. The watcher at the door turned his head a fraction. Pride, he whispered, not ridge. Our own Selra did not look. Away from the hunter pinned under her hand, she raised her voice enough to travel. Come with calm tales, she called. This is a den, not a field. The footsteps slowed. The first shapes at the cleft were gold and strong. Eyes bright, no blades out. A tall elder with silver in his stripes stepped into the den and took in the picture. Mother, child, guest, 2 watchers, 3. Ridge hunters held without blood. He breathed out, a tired sound air. He said, you always choose the shortcut through the thorns, and you always come home with scratches. He looked at Grant for a long second, then at the ring on his wrist, then at Selra's steady hand. The law stands, he said at last, flat and sure. The ridge hunters froze, their plan shrinking in the heat of real judgment. Selra eased her grip a little. Not mercy, measure. She waited while the elder turned to the ridge hunter's leader, who still waited beyond the cleft. You bring a human task to a den that passed the stone test, he said. You bring metal teeth to a home that holds a child. You do not speak for the elders, and you do not speak for the law. Leave, or face the hunt at dawn when you have no fog to hide your fear. The ridge hunters melted back into the dark, not bold now, only thin and angry. Selra let the pinned attacker rise and watched him go with eyes that promised she knew his smell. Air was dragged out by the watcher with a grip like iron wrapped in fur. The den breathed again. The cub pressed against Selra's leg, then against Grant's boot, spreading its small courage, like paint on both of them. The elder stayed. His gaze weighed the room. Then he spoke to Selra. Your bridge is strong, he said, and your guest stands where he said he would. He turned to Grant. For 3 moons you walk under our leaves without hunt, but you must understand, some will still test the rope with their teeth. Do not cut it yourself by pride or by panic. Grant bowed his head. I will keep my spark asleep unless breath is in danger, and I will carry the child if the mother needs both hands. The elder nodded and stepped out. The pride shapes followed. The watchers returned to their quiet posts. The fire woke a little. With a single pop like a friendly finger on the rim of a drum, Selra looked at Grant. Her mouth curved with a smile that showed the tips of fangs like a promise and a thanks. You stood, she said, simple as that. He looked at the cub, who tried to roar again and only made a brave squeak. We stood, he answered, all of us, outside. The last thin sounds of the ridge hunters faded. Inside, the den gathered itself and became warm again, but the night did not go back to soft. It held a bright edge, a hint of dawn with teeth. Selra settled by the fire and patted the mat where Grant should sit. The cub crawled into his lap and finally let sleep take its small body. Selra watched them both with a gaze that was fierce and gentle in the same breath. Tomorrow will not be quiet, she said, and the way she said it turned the words into a promise instead of a fear. The law had held, the bridge had not broken, and morning was already sharpening its light somewhere beyond the trees. Dawn came like a blade being sharpened, slow and bright. the fog lifting in thin ribbons that caught the sun and then let it go. The den smelled of warm ash and fruit. The cub slept with its head on Grant's boot. Silra sat awake, eyes on the doorway, tail still, breath steady. She had not slept much, but her calm was deep, the calm of a hunter who trusts her ground and her choice. When the first birds clicked in the canopy, the watchers stirred. One peered into the light and gave a soft call. "The path is clear," he said. "The ridge hunters are gone, but the elders call for words at the listening stone." Selra stood, touched the cub's ear, and looked at Grant. "Today we speak where everyone can hear," she said, not as challenge, as promise. Grant rose and checked his small ring of sensors. He shut them down and slid them into his pack. He left the fire neat and safe, a little triangle of coals sleeping under ash. Selra nodded approval without words. The cub yawned so wide its tiny fangs showed, then hopped up with a soft trill, ready to walk the world with its whole body. They stepped into the morning, silver leaves shaking old dew into new light. The pride gathered along the path, gold and shadow, some curious, some doubtful, none careless. Grant kept his hands open, and his step measured. He walked a half-step behind Selra, the way a guest walks with a queen and a mother. The cub trotted between them and then ahead, glancing back with bright eyes, as if carrying a secret that was about to become a story. At the clearing of the listening stone, the circle had already formed. The elder with silver in his stripes stood near the ring. 3 other elders beside him. The stone itself was warm and waiting, thin lines of old light sleeping under its skin. Selra placed her palm on it for a breath, not to wake judgment, to greet an old friend. The elders dipped their heads, not low, but not small either. The silver elder spoke first. His voice was clear. "Today, we name what happened in the night, and we decide what will be remembered after this sun goes down." He looked at Selra. "You say the law judged." The guest stood. "The ridge hunters broke the bridge and were turned away." He looked at Grant. "You say you kept your spark asleep and took a blow with your shoulder so the child would not take it with her bones." He looked at the cub. "You say with your eyes that your belly was full and your sleep was not scared." The cub blinked slow and pleased, and the circle softened, even the doubtful ones, because a child's truth is hard to argue with. Another elder with a scar across his nose stepped forward. He sniffed the air near Grant, near Selra, near the cub, near the stone. He spoke in the old way, naming scents like lines in a poem. Trust, fire, fruit, steal asleep, fear rinsed away, watchfulness, and something else. New rope, new bridge. Selra's whiskers tipped at that, and Grant felt the ring on his wrist as if it had warmed. A ridge hunter stood at the edge of the crowd. "Not air," another eyes hard. He called out, "The law is old. The law is simple. Humans bring spark and take soil. If we change the old words, the forest will forget our steps." The circle rumbled. Not anger, caution. Selra lifted her chin. "The law is old," she answered, "and it says, feed the child and the mother will judge." Last night the mother judged, and the stone agreed. The law is not a wall, it is a path. When the path meets a river, you build a bridge. You do not knock down the mountain and call that wisdom. The silver elder raised a paw. His voice did not shout. It went still, and the circle followed it. "The law stands, and it breathes," he said. 3 moons of safety were given by the stone. They remain. He turned to Grant. "Guest, stand on the stone and speak the last of your heart. Not to prove, to mark." Grant stepped onto the rock. It was warm through his boots. He looked at the ring of faces, at Selra, at the cub. He did not think of speeches. He thought of the first cry in the fog, and the way hunger makes the world too sharp. He spoke simple. "I am not here to take. I am here to stand where I said I would, to share food, to mend what I can, to keep my spark asleep unless breath is in danger. If you wish me gone after 3 moons, I will go without teeth or fire. If you call, I will answer, not because of fear, because of bond. The stone brightened a little, not verdict, recognition. The circle breathed as one for a moment, and then apart again. Selra stepped up beside him, not behind, not in front, beside. She touched the carved ring tied to his braid with one claw. Her voice lowered. Music and iron. I name what I choose. Every ear that hears me will remember. She looked at Grant and then at the elders. My den is his den, for the moon's named by law, and more if the bond holds. My hunt is my own. But he will stand at my back when I ask. My child will touch his sleeve and feel safe. She paused, and the morning leaned in. I name him mate by the slow path, not the fast one, not by heat, by steadiness, by the bridge he chose to walk when he could have walked away. A murmur moved around the circle like wind in tall grass. Some ears rose, some flattened. The ridge hunter at the edge sneered. Slow path is a trick, he said. Say the word, and show the mark if you dare. Selra's eyes turned to him and made him smaller without a step. The mark is trust, she said. The word is tomorrow. The cub ran to the listening stone and stood on small toes. It lifted a thin cord it had carried tucked under its soft collar, a new loop of braided grass with 3 little beads, one gold, one dark, one pale blue. It held it up with pride that made the air bright. For him, it chirped. For us, for fire, for sleep, for stories. Grant knelt and bowed his head. The cub slipped the cord over his wrist, beside the carved ring. The beads clicked together like tiny stars finding their places. The silver elder smiled, small and real. There is the mark, he said, and the circle heard it. He raised his paw again. This is the memory we carry. A human fed a hungry child. The mother judged. The stone agreed. The bridge was cut and tied again in the night. And in the morning a bond was named by the slow path. He turned, and his gaze found the ridge hunters like a net. If any cut the rope again, they will meet the hunt at noon, not in fog, not with lies, but with eyes open and names spoken. The circle answered with a low drum of tales, not attack, agreement. The ridge hunter who had spoken stepped back, his teeth no longer eager, his eyes slid to the trees, to the place where cowards carry their plans. But he said nothing more. The watchers relaxed, not empty, ready in the way of good guards, who know they are not alone. Selra looked at Grant without the crowd for a breath. All the royal ease and the play near the knife still there. And now, something gentler under it, a quiet that belonged to people, who have made a hard choice and are at peace with it. She brushed his wrist once, claws sheathed. The slow path is the strong one, she said. He nodded. The strong one is the one a child can walk. They left the stone together. Pride members stepped aside. Some bowed tiny bows, some only watched. A few came forward with gifts, small and true. A twist of dried fruit, a strip of smoked meat, a flat stone painted with a child's paw, and a son. Grant took each with both hands and gave a word of thanks that fit in the morning without pushing it. Back at the den, the fire woke into small flame. The cub circled twice and dropped into a nap made of complete trust. Grant hung the new cord where the smoke would bless it. Selra set a pot on the coals. The smell of roots and meat rose and made the air happy. Outside, the forest carried on. Birds clicked. Water talked to rocks. Wind traced the edges of leaves like a careful reader touching lines of a favorite story. Grant sat where the mat remembered him. Selra sat beside him, not touching, near. Her tail made a lazy question mark, and then a period, then a comma again, not an end, a continuation. He laughed softly at the thought, and she tilted her head at the sound. What is the joke? She asked. He shook his head. Not a joke, a feeling. Today is not an ending. It is a good comma. Selra smiled with the tips of her fangs. I like commas, she said. They mean the story still has breath. They ate in easy silence, sharing a bowl, sharing the small work of the morning. When the sun climbed higher, Selra stood and stretched. We will hunt at dusk, she said. You will see the river's silverbacks, and we will show the cub how to take the wind's lesson without losing the ground." Grant rose, slung his pack, and checked the cord and the ring on his wrist. He looked at the doorway, at the path, at the place where the bridge now stood in. Every mind that mattered. He was a guest, a guard, a mate by the slow path. A man who had fed a child and found a family he had not come to seek. The day leaned open like a new door, and they walked into it together, mother, child, and human, with the forest watching and the old law smiling in the leaves.